Are we ready? Are we ready to go? Hey, we are live.
Hi, welcome.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Puppets, Masks, and Crankies. My name is Sheila Gaskins, and we are so glad that you can join us for this evening of Puppet, Mask, and Crankies festivities. I'm a mom, I'm an arts advocate, and I also have, we want to thank, I also have two friends who got this grant with me, and they're going to introduce themselves. Take it away, Tara and Maura.
Hey, I'm Tara Cariaso. I am a theater artist and mask maker and the co-founder of Waxing Moon Masks. Happy to be here.
Great. Hi, everybody. I'm Maura Dwyer. I'm a Baltimore-based illustrator, muralist, teaching artist, and fairly new cranky maker from Baltimore City.
Nice. And we also want to honor the land, Piscataway Indian Nation, Lumbee. Also, I want to thank our ancestors who made it possible for me to even do art. So, people, we are here. Puppet, Mask, and Cranky Shifting the Story has been a grit fund and alternate roots funded project from Sheila Gaskins, Maura Dwyer, and Tara help me out.
Cariaso.
Exploring these art forms. So the question is, when did you fall in love with your medium? Hip hop is 50 years old, and they always ask that question. So when did you fall in love with puppetry, mask, and crankies? And I'll start. It was in elementary school. My art teacher, Mr. Hammock, he drove a Volkswagen, and he came, and it was outside. It was a beautiful day, and we did puppetry, and it was amazing. My life has been changed as a result. Maura, Tara?
Yeah, I think I first saw Crankies at Baltimore's renowned Cranky Festival. And I remember when I first saw it, it felt like a family heirloom that I didn't know that I had lost, like this beautiful, delicate, glowing, intimate, ballad-based song and visual. And I remember just feeling incredibly emotional when I saw them. And I just wanted to know how they were made and get closer to them. And that was probably 6 years ago.
For me, I was studying at the San Francisco Mime Troupe, and they had this really dusty old maker workshop, right? And everything, there's things from 50 years of their work, right? And they were these masks that they wanted us to use for a workshop, a training workshop, and they were just caked with dust, and they'd been sitting in this, and it was just like this artifact from another age. And when I put a mask on, I realized I wasn't the same person anymore. And I mean that in a way like, as somebody who wasn't usually cast and who wasn't allowed to play multiple kinds of characters and different ranges of characters, it was like all of a sudden I had this doorway and this opportunity to be something that other people didn't see me as. Nice.
Yeah. So we're going to talk a little bit about what we did this summer. I was at Lakeland, and a wonderful experience. I've been to 3 different places. And as you can see, what I did was I had samples of certain puppets, and the kids looked at them. Next slide, Nia. So this was at the Arena Playhouse, the summer camp. And what was so amazing about this is that they were pre-K to the 4th grade. Look at the detail. That is Wednesday from the Addams Family. She worked really hard on that. She was focused and knew exactly what she wanted to create before she sat down. And as you can see, the teeth were made from a plastic bowl. And look at the expression on this puppet right there. Look at those eyebrows. Talk about emotions. So I was blown away with this group, because they only had 15 minutes in the classroom. And we're talking little people, and they was focused. Next slide, Nia. Okay, these were some of the older students. There was a film class, and as a result, we did some puppetry so that they could learn story and storytelling, and they were focused. I had a lot of time with them. And one of the things that I liked about that is that that was their first experience with it, and they just went for it. And if you can look at the green one over here, he has to be at least 8 years old, between 6 and 8 years old. Doesn't that look like velvet? It looks like the material of a puppet, like Kermit the Frog. Okay, next slide, Nia. Yes, so future puppeteers. How can we create future puppeteers? This, see, look at that. Look like Kermit the Frog. I love this. This was at Lakeland, and it was families there. So it was mothers, fathers, daughters. We had a meal. We were able to do a show afterwards. It really was a wonderful experience. Take it away. Who's next?
Looks like me. Okay. So my name is Tara again, and I'm a mask maker, primarily working in masks for theater. You can go ahead with the next slide, Nia. So with our company, Waxing Moon Masks, a lot of what we do is we're examining what's going on in the field of mask play and physical theater performance. One of the elements that we have been expanding on is changing the faces that are seen in mask play, because there's primarily there's a domination of European faces that end up being in mask play for the stage here in the US, especially in physical theater. And we don't see a diversity of faces reflected in the objects of masks. So that's one of the things that we are focused on as a company. You can do the next slide. Another thing that we're working on right now is we are working on reimagining the form of commedia dell'arte. And this is a sort of very niche field of physical theater play, but I was exposed to it when I was in high school, and it was in college then, and then continued to be around this work. It's comic. It's reliant on big, very visible physical play. And the thing about the masks is that they are taken back to 1500s Europe, and so that's not really relevant. Those characters that come out of 1500 Europe, that's not really relevant to what we're doing right now in classrooms and for education purposes. So we're reimagining how commedia is still a useful, vivacious form for play, and taking out some of the harmful stock archetypes and tropes. Next. Last element is we're focusing in the theater field, specifically in physical theater. We're working on reimagining this idea of what is the information, the valid information, the important information that goes into a mask. What is it about a feature? What is it about a mask that has information and features, right? So we've started focusing our work away from stereotypes, but of course, to get away from stereotypes, you have to be able to identify what that is. So we've been doing a lot of work with understanding how stereotypes manifest in story and mediums, TV, all the mediums, and refocusing our efforts on using archetypes for creating character. So we've got physical theater pedagogy, so working on our feet. We're working with partners called Factions of Fools in DC, and then also in the mask territory, creating masks that are built from archetypes. So that's me.
Nice.
Hi, everybody. Again, I'm Dwyer, and I'm going to talk a little bit about Cranky workshops that we did this fall as part of the Grit Fund, and some history that I've been learning and kind of where I'm going from here. So like I said, I was kind of introduced to Crankies via the Cranky Fest in Baltimore, and I feel like as somebody who participated once in that and has been a participant and lover and audience member, it's changed a lot over the past 5 years, and really it's been, I think, in existence in 8 years. And curated by Josh Kahn and artist Emily Schubert, they've really brought in diverse artists like Crank the Beat, a collaboration with Beatbox Dads, Jamal Blackroot Collier, and Max Bent. And this year they actually had a traditional Ethiopian cultural dancer named Malaku Ballet doing an original Cranky about the traditional dance form of Akisa. And that was such a treat to see. And I think as a Cranky artist myself and as a teaching artist who's doing Cranky workshops with students, My goal is to just bring this kind of diversity into the classroom when I'm showing students examples of work, when I'm thinking about what stories can we bring in as inspiration, and places to jump off for students to create their own stories. And so I'll kind of talk about what we did in the fall. So this is the Greenmount West Community Center. We just made an awesome cranky. Actually, if you just go back, I can really quickly talk about what you're seeing here. So in the bottom left corner, it says, "Welcome to the multiverse." So students talked about and looked at like superhero stories and anime stories and graphic novels that they really loved, and then kind of wrote their own version and put themselves into the stories and then drew those on a long cranky scroll together on a big table. And I think really influenced by different like multiverse characters that are happening in the world now. That's something that I could never come up with. I'm so glad I just went in there and had a really open dialogue with students about what they wanted to make a cranky about. And that's a big shift in my own teaching artist pedagogy. So let's go next one. And these are collaborative workshops that I've done over the summers at libraries and schools, where we start with looking at Black and Brown poets, we look at graphic novels, students kind of bring in movies that they like, and they might, and we might look at one particular poem. I might ask students to put it in their own words and rewrite it as one line of the poem. Then the whole thing comes together as a collaborative script, and then each student makes one panel and it's all together. So it's really about gaining inspiration from Black and Brown authors and artists and all different forms of storytelling, and then making something collaborative together, and then they perform it for each other. And next slide. And these are some history examples that I bring into the classroom to talk about not just the kind of like Irish and British ballad singing that I was exposed to and that is part of my heritage and background in history. I definitely talk about that, like learning about Irish crankies from the 1800s was really touching. Like there was really multimedia, like there was a lot of singing and dancing and storytelling, and it was all about myth making of Ireland, and it was for recent Irish immigrants who were kind of sad about their missing their homeland. And so I think that kind of like myth telling and nostalgia is really beautiful and important in cranky making. But there's also this incredible history from Bangladesh and in Jewish scroll literature, and here in the 1800s that you can find mostly through Sue Truman's Cranky History website, which is an incredible place to find more information about cranky history. So these are just a few examples that I bring in with my students, and they usually have examples to share with me. And I'm always collecting more examples of crankies in the world, in history. So if you know any and you want to put them in the chat, please do. And lastly, these are lessons learned about how to kind of approach cranky making with students of color in Maryland, really looking to BIPOC authors, fuse original storytelling with stories from students of their own making, really connecting back to history and culture in a collaborative approach, and show a variety of examples in the classroom with context.
Awesome. Okay. So we got some special guests here that's going to be presenting with us, and starting with Paulette Richards. She's an independent researcher and puppet artist based in Atlanta. Her book, Objects Performance in the Black Atlantic, the United States, is forthcoming from Routledge. Give it up for Dr. Paulette Richards. Hi.
Greetings. It's a great pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me. What I'm going to share today is the opening of the book. So if I could have the slide, please. And the title is Psychic Amputation, the Suppression of African Object Performance Under Slavery in the United States. Next slide, please. So if you will, imagine with me a young man who has been initiated into the Gelede Society and trained as a mask dancer. Let's call him Bayode, he who brings joy. Next slide, please. Captured in the territory that is now Nigeria and sold to British slavers in 1735 as a result of ongoing warfare between the Kingdom of Oyo and the Kingdom of Dahomey, Bayode labors in the tobacco fields on a farm in the Piedmont area of Virginia. Though he dreams of dancing once more in the Gelede spectacle with iron anklets jangling in time to the intricate rhythms of the drums. African drums are strictly forbidden. Even if they were allowed, he would not be able to play them as skillfully as the trained drummers in his community, and he would be hard-pressed to make a mask. Next slide, please. Bayode wields a hoe from sunup to sundown. Gaining access to the precision tools necessary to carve a wooden sculpture would be difficult, as would finding the time to do it. Back home, the Gelede Society usually commissioned masks from blacksmiths who were also skilled wood carvers. There were spiritual reasons for making masks from wood of specific types of trees, but scanning his new habitat, Bayode concludes that these trees don't grow in Virginia. Perhaps another type of wood could serve as an acceptable substitute, but the plantation owner strictly controls the harvesting of trees for lumber and firewood. So Bayode recognizes that obtaining a large chunk of valuable timber is beyond his individual means. Next slide, please. As much as the mask dance itself, Bayode misses the fellowship of the Gelede spectacle, when nearly everyone in his village had a role in the preparations. Babatunde Lawal traces the origins of the Gelede spectacle to fertility rituals because the costume is made of cloth sashes used to carry babies on a woman's back. These lengths of cloth could be purchased, but in many places they were loaned by the women of the community and then tied to hoops supporting the masked dancers' regalia. Bayode is on a plantation where there aren't enough women to provide the number of headscarves or sashes necessary to cover such a rig. Even after the 1794 invention of the cotton gin sparked a dramatic increase in the population of enslaved laborers, by 1860, only 1/4 of the enslaved population lived on plantations with more than 50 slaves. Next slide, please. Enslaved people had very little cloth at their disposal. Since they were customarily issued only 1 or 2 sets of clothing for warm weather and 1 or 2 for cold, by the end of the season, clothing was so worn that it often required patches to keep the garment whole. Back home, the Gelede Society might collect money to purchase cloth to make fresh costumes for the dancers, but Bayode and his fellow captives have little or no monetary resources or opportunities to shop for fabrics. Next slide, please. At Christmas, the plantation owner organizes a feast. Though Bayode is thankful for the opportunity to rest and eat his fill, the rations can't match the flavor of the food and drink the women of his village prepared for Gelede festivals. The Gelede Society would organize hunting expeditions, raise money, or solicit in-kind contributions so that women would be able to provide food for every person in the community, as well as the many visitors who came for the performance. The plantation owner offers each adult a dram of rum and commands the hands to entertain his guests with singing and dancing. Bayode receives an extra tot for cutting a fine jig, and the communal singing lifts his spirits, even though he doesn't understand all the words. Next slide, please. With his limited English vocabulary, Bayode starts talking to his peers about holding a celebration similar to the Gelede spectacles he had known. But only 4 or 5 of the 3 dozen hands on the plantation are ethnically Yoruba, and half of them were born in the colony with no memories of Africa. None of the other enslaved people has ever seen a Gelede masquerade. Some of them have become devout Christians who share the master's belief that the kind of masks and sculptures their ancestors made were heathen idols, and that these performances involving such objects amount to devil worship. Next slide, please. Even the Christians have to sneak off into the woods to praise Jesus in their own way. Just as Bayode begins to understand that his project would probably have to take place in secret, The plantation owner gets wind of the plan and punishes him for fomenting revolt. Next slide, please. The purpose of theater in traditional African societies was community building. Africans built and maintained meeting halls for many different types of association. Next slide, please. They built shrines and temples and mosques for religious observances. Next slide, please. They built palaces for their kings and courts. Next slide, please. But typically did not choose to erect or maintain buildings designated for theatrical performances because they conceived of theater as an activity that involved the whole community, not just as an entertainment restricted to patrons who paid for seats in a hall. Next slide, please. More than imposing a prohibition on the creation of figurative sculptures that represented an African worldview, the psychic amputation that slavery enacted on New World Africans was the destruction of social networks and institutions. Puppets, masks, and performing objects are therefore powerful tools for healing and rebuilding our communities. Thank you.
Awesome. Awesome. So if you have questions, we're going to have questions at the end of the presentation. Paulette, we could spend like 2 hours with you in this history, because that is something I know I don't know, and I'm curious to find out, and we could just talk about this for days. So people, if you have some questions, put it in the chat. We're going to move along because we got a lot of people. And so up next is Edna Bland. She couldn't be with us today, but she is a certified educator, teaching artist, and puppeteer who has honed her craft at the Kennedy Center, Shakespeare Globe Theater, and Lincoln Center Education's Juilliard School. And as a puppeteer, she was mentored by Carol Spiney, who was Big Bird of Sesame Street. And she sends her regards. And we have a clip that we want to show from Edna.
Central Florida students mastering the art of puppetry. Millennium Middle School Fine Arts and Communications Magnet offers the only puppetry class in the state.
I've never heard of this. In tonight's Getting Results in Our Schools, Julie Broughton introduces us to a teacher who learned her skills from a legendary puppeteer.
Getting Results in Our Schools, sponsored by Crayola Experience.
All right, guys, so we're going to learn like the 5 basics of puppetry today.
Step inside Edna Bland's puppetry class at Millennium Middle School.
Why is it your favorite class? Well, I love to express myself, and I like to make up skits and improv because you never know where it's going to take you.
And you'll encounter more than a few characters.
Well, how you doing? Nice to see you today.
Bland's career in puppetry started 24 years ago when she met Carol Spiney, also known as Big Bird.
And I said, I absolutely have to do this. And he said, if you are serious about this, you're welcome to come to the set anytime you want. And I did.
Now, what started as an after-school club.
Hello, I am depressed.
Hey, bro, this is my yo cameraman. What's up, bro?
Yo, bro.
Is an elective so popular, it has a waiting list.
Kids love learning in a fun way. So why not use things like puppetry and art and music in order to help them to teach? Puppet up, belly button, eye contact, tilt your wrist. Good job.
Students learn how to enter and exit a scene.
It looks easy, but it's not. It is a lot of technique and work that is involved in it.
How to speak clearly.
Accent on every syllable. Every syllable.
And how to make eye contact.
So once you have the basic techniques down, a lot of it comes really, honestly, from your soul, from the inside.
A big part of puppetry is creating a character profile. This is Steve. He's 16 and aspires to be in the military.
Well, stay happy, guys.
Bye.
Julie Broughton, News 6.
What a cool thing.
See, I was picturing like sock puppets or, you know, those
this
were
is the
some
real deal. Those
real
are professional.
cool
They look
puppets.
Muppet-like.
Yeah, they did.
Exactly. Gee, I wonder how old, what's the age cutoff for that?
You want in?
Oh my, I would
We're all
love to do
cut
that.
off. We're out.
Thank you, Edna. Again, she sends her regards. And if you want to contact her, you can contact her the same way that you guys contacted us, artpart67, or I'll have a email for her. Somebody will put it in the chat. Okay, so we're rolling right along. Valeska Maria Pupolo. She works as an artist educator and cultural organizer in Baltimore, Maryland, embracing a wide array of tactics from puppetry to participatory performance. Valeska's work is motivated by an interest in healing and repair in our relationships to each other and to the natural world. All right, Valeska, welcome. Can't hear you. We can't hear you. I can't. Can y'all hear Valeska?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Yes, thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this panel. It's an absolute honor to be joined by people that I consider my teachers, people that deeply inspire me through the work that they do. So one of the things that I really wanted to focus on in sharing a little bit about the work that I've done in Baltimore is reflecting on the role that community has played, both in my own evolution as a puppeteer and in the way that I understand that medium. You can go to the next slide. I really want to acknowledge my teachers in this art form. Though I went to art school, I did not learn about puppetry in an institution. I learned about puppetry from people in community. One of the most important places that has really brought me up as a puppeteer is Black Cherry Puppet Theater here in Baltimore, Maryland, that has been around for now 40 years, sharing the art of puppetry with young people across Maryland through all kinds of programming and residency programs. And I think one of the pieces that stays with me about my work with Black Cherry Puppet Theater is the importance that the theater places on creating lots of opportunity for free, publicly accessible workshops and learning opportunities and performances in a neighborhood that is underserved by theaters and other arts organizations in Southwest Baltimore. You can go to the next slide. Another place that I have learned from that I want to acknowledge is Bread and Puppet Theater, which is a street theater and performance company that is now based in Vermont that really centers social justice in their performances and brings visual poetry to people in the streets. I interned with them about 15 years ago and continue to be affected by the way in which they use storytelling and large-scale puppetry in not just performances, but also in political action and protests. You can go to the next slide. Another group that really informed my work is Nana Projects, which founded the Great Halloween Lantern Parade. I worked with them in the early 2000s, and I'm really grateful that I had the opportunity to learn about processional arts, thinking about large-scale object building, stilt walking, illuminated objects, and bringing a lot of people together in outdoor events to experience the joy of parade. You can go to the next slide. And I also want to acknowledge the United Workers, which is an anti-poverty organization and human rights organization headquartered here in Baltimore. I've had the great honor to work with them over the last 15 years, supporting a variety of different initiatives and being educated in turn about their work to end poverty. And one of the things that was really exciting for me is that they really embrace the role of the arts in not just in protests and creating a compelling visual, but also in storytelling. And the image on the top right was a very formative experience for me. A group of people came together in 2009 to create something called our Harbor Day, in which low-wage workers working predominantly in the Inner Harbor talked about their experiences and also shared their vision of what a more just economy would look like to them. You can move to the next slide. So for some years, I was really exploring sort of I work at the Maryland Institute College of Art, which is a private art institution, and I struggle with the limited access that people have to the arts education that is offered by that school. And so I've really endeavored to figure out ways to connect with the neighborhoods that I live in and the community that I live in. And I've been really grateful for the ways in which I've learned from the people here in Baltimore about cultural practices that are relevant for their communities. And so I've had the opportunity to teach stilt walking and shadow puppetry and also engage in festival work over the last 15 years as a way to connect with people in the streets. You can go to the next slide. One of the most impactful projects for me was working with the United Workers and their youth organization, Free Your Voice, about 5 years ago on an anti-incinerator campaign. It was a campaign to stop the nation's largest trash burning incinerator from being built within 1 mile of several schools in South Baltimore, a community already dealing with a lot of environmental injustice. And I collaborated with some of the youth organizers from that organization to create a story that was a kind of allegory to talk about people's connections to the land that they live on and their desire to create their own future and not be impacted by the visions and desires of outside interests and developers. You can go to the next slide. We performed the Cranky probably 20 times in Baltimore City at various festivals and community gatherings, as well as in the Northeast. And it was a really powerful way to connect with people and have conversations with them about the visions they have for their own communities. You can go to the next slide. This really informed my approach to really thinking about parade and puppetry moving forward. I've really looked for opportunities to connect with social movement organizations around developing large-scale puppets and props for protests. And this is just one example from a number of workshops that we had as part of the Baltimore People's Climate Movement about 4 or 5 years ago to develop visual imagery that we could take to climate marches in DC, but also continue to use in protests and rallies and community celebrations here in Baltimore. You can go to the next slide. Another opportunity that I've really sought out is ways to connect with powerful artists and storytellers in our communities. And so I had the great honor to work with Sheila Gaskins on a play that she produced and directed called Last House Standing about the highway to nowhere here in Baltimore. And one of the things that really inspires me about puppetry is the Arabber horse or pony that you see on the bottom right. It would have been really hard for us to bring a live animal into the theater, but through puppetry, we can bring into our spaces the physical representation of beings or spirits that may not be able to be visible to us or present with us. You can go to the next slide. Another way that I've really thought about the roles that puppetry and cranky performance can play is this is an example of a story based on a local park. And I was lucky to work with Dirk Joseph, who's on the panel, and his daughter Azaria, and a couple of other artists in our city to tell us some stories about a local park using materials that came from that park. So using plastic bags and trash that were collected in the park to build a shadow screen and puppets for the show. You can go to the next slide. And part of what I'm really excited about with puppetry is just the accessibility. So people using a lot of different kinds of materials that you can find in your recycling bin, stories that you've inherited from your family, or stories that are familiar to you from songs that you hear. And for 13 years now, we've had the Black Cherry Puppet Slamwich at Black Cherry Puppet Theater, which has brought all kinds of different people to our stage to share short works of puppetry, sometimes works in progress. And our next one is on March 19th, which will be hosted by Sheila Gaskins. Next slide. Also, through the relationships that I've been able to build through Black Cherry Puppet Theater, but also through some of the other collaborations, we were invited to do a parade for the So We Bohemian Festival, which takes place annually down in Southwest Baltimore. And I was lucky to work with Michael Lamison, the director of Black Cherry, and also Dirk Joseph, who's on the panel tonight, and a lot of other artists in our city to collaboratively build representations of beings that, again, we may not be able to see with our regular human eyes in the everyday, but spirits and beings that protect our water and our soil and that are under our city streets, but needed to be uplifted in a community celebration. And this was just last spring. You can go to the next slide. And also, I'm involved with a great Halloween parade. I spoke earlier today with Paulette when she arrived at my house about the power of parades. And one of the things that I am so moved by with parades is that they are such a powerful medium for presenting art in a public space. They have lots of points of entry for people. People that have a lot of experience with making and people that are new to making all can find a way to participate in processional work. It's a joy creating activity. It is something that everyone around the world has some kind of connection to through the traditions that they come from. And also one of the things that Paulette made me realize today in conversation is that it's a kind of public art that keeps evolving. Every year, new people come together. Every year, we imagine new ways of representing who we want to be and what we want to make in the world. And it's not static. And that's one of the reasons why I continue to practice that form. You can go to the next slide. And then briefly, I'll say that I've also had the opportunity to work with some other organizations that I just want to name for those on the call. The Vaudevillains New Year's Brigade, who are trying to figure out how to engage with an age-old tradition of the Mummers Parade in Philadelphia, but bring it to the present day, make it acknowledge the heterogeneous communities that we live in, the diversity of people that need to be in leadership, and the important ecological and political stories that we can bring to people that are gathering for a parade. So this year we participated in the Mummers Parade, and the theme was to focus on a green space in Philadelphia that's threatened with development. That's really important, not just for wildlife, but also for people to have access to green space without having to pay for use of that space. Similarly, all the saints in Richmond, I've gotten a chance to work with, and I'm really moved by the way that they use puppetry and parade as a way to engage people in social justice issues and to think about the political issues that we confront in our present day. I think that may be the end. If we can go to the next slide. Oh, I'll just briefly say, always looking for opportunities to share. I think the challenge with institutions is that they can really be walled off places where there's a lot of access to information and resources around puppetry. So I'm grateful for the work that Maura and Tara and Sheila are doing to extend that work out into community beyond institutions. These are just some examples of places that I've taught, and always looking for places to teach outside of institutions. And then the next slide. Another project that I'm working on, I just want to give a shout out to some really amazing people here in Baltimore. Mama Rashida Foreman Bay, one of the co-founders of Wombwork Productions, and Mama Salah Jenkins, an artist in our community of many decades, ceramicist. We're currently working on a processional figure that hopefully will be able to participate in a parade this year that celebrates the power of mamas, or women who have really given a lot of their energy and life force to nurturing community. And there are many people on this panel that represent that. So I'll just end there, and thank you all for your attention and for inviting me to be part of this. Thank you so much.
Valeska. Great, great, great. We're rolling right along. And again, if you have some questions, put it in the chat, or we will have an opportunity to talk to people before this ends. Up next, we have Dr. Schroeder Cherry. He's currently affiliated with the James E. Lewis Museum of Art and Arts for Learning, Maryland. Schroeder Cherry is a Baltimore-based visual artist and puppeteer who for over 40 years has used his rod puppets, wood cutouts, and African marionettes to perform for intergenerational audiences in museums, schools, libraries, and cultural centers across the U.S. Original shows include Tuskegee Airmen, Land of Primary Colors, Can You Spell Harlem, Underground Railroad, Not a Subway, and the Civil Rights Movement Children's Crusade. Okay, hi, welcome, Dr. Schroeder-Cherry.
Hi, how are you?
Do your thing.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here. This is actually a treat for me to be able to participate and see a lot of my friends who do puppetry, but this is also an opportunity to see the wide variety of puppetry that is available. Unlike the community large group participation that you just heard about, I am a single puppeteer. So my programs are very compact, and although I can work a number of puppets in one show, I am still just a solo performer. Next slide. The puppets that I use are primarily rod puppets, and my love with puppetry began when I was a child. I played with puppets when I was a kid. I had marionettes, those string puppets. I had hand puppets, and I stopped in junior high school for some reason. It just wasn't cool to do puppets as a junior high school kid. But I picked it back up in college when I had an instructor who was doing amazing kites. And when I asked him why he was doing kites, he said, well, this is what I liked to do when I was a child, and I want to see how it affects me as an adult. And I thought that was an interesting approach. For me, my childhood interest was puppets. So let me see how I respond to puppets as a college student. And I realized that I really enjoyed puppetry, even as a college student and later on as an adult. So during college, I apprenticed to a puppet master in Chicago, Gary Jones, and learned his particular way of making puppets and stayed with them for a while. And then later on, I branched out on my own. Next slide. This is from a show called Underground Railroad, Not a Subway. So in addition to the rod puppets, I use props, sometimes or what I call wooden cutouts, to tell a narrative story. The shows that I do are sometimes historically based, sometimes they're more fanciful. Underground Railroad, Not a Subway was inspired by an experience I had in New York when I was talking to some high school students, and I said, you guys know about the Underground Railroad, right? And one guy looked at me very disdainfully and said, yeah, man, everybody knows that was a subway that took Black people to freedom. So I thought, oh, there's some learning opportunities here. So let's see what we can do with the show. And this show, I wrote it in 1997. I thought it was going to last for a couple of months. We're still doing this show. I performed with Visual Arts for Learning, Maryland, and we performed all over the state. But this show has also been performed across the country in museums, cultural centers, and libraries. Next slide. Sometimes the shows are in large spaces with a lot of children. This is a school-based show. Next slide. Sometimes the performances are outdoors. This happens to be an historic cabin in Maryland, a place that was owned by a Black family. And it was for me a magical moment just to perform the Underground Railroad, Not a Subway at an historic site. Next slide. With my background as a museum professional, I also wanted to provide an opportunity for adults to play in the galleries where adults could just be free and use their imaginations. So this puppet is a museum docent. She is someone who gives tours in museums only to adults. Her name is Miss Lily, and she does not do well with children. So her background is basically she does museum tours and she only performs for adults. Next slide. We also get a chance to perform in Baltimore with Puppet Slams, Black Cherry Puppet Theater, and also Glen Echo Puppet Company. From time to time, they have what we call Puppet Slams, where puppeteers will come on stage and be there for about 5 to 10 minutes and do a performance. This is a performance with 2 puppets. And in this particular scene, the woman is singing a song by Nancy Wilson called Guess Who I Saw Today. Next slide. Here's a shot of a group of my my family. I made all of these puppets with the exception of the one in the front. The one in the front, the man sitting in the center, is actually a Brazilian puppet, a Mama Lowell type of puppet. And this was a gift from a friend in New York who found this in a thrift shop. And he saw it and thought, this puppet belongs to Schroeder. He needs to send it to him. So I'm really grateful for that. All my other puppets are made out of wood, a plastic wood with a soft body. Next slide. I also have a collection of African puppets. I started going to Africa in the previous century, back in 1980s. I started looking for puppets in different parts of Africa. So I traveled to Mali, Ghana, Senegal, and Ivory Coast, and brought back a number of puppets over the years. This is a puppet from Mali. It's a gazelle. And I used her in the show to teach children about primary and secondary colors. The figure on top of the puppet's head actually pounds a drum. So when I activate the puppet up and down, the arms go up and down and pound the drum. Next slide. This is another shot from a puppet slam. You can see how I'm operating the rod puppet. So I have one hand that operates the two hands on the puppet's body. My other hand controls the body of the puppet, and also the string mechanism opens up the mouth and eyes. Next slide. A current show that we're also doing is called the Children's Civil Rights Crusade. And here I am actually using a puppet who narrates the story, but as he tells the story, he's manipulating other puppets. And this particular scene shows him talking about a youth organizer inside the church. Next slide. This is another scene from the Children's Civil Rights Crusade. And what you're looking at here is the puppet manipulating a crowd of children who are protesting. You see firefighters with their fire hoses. Behind them are policemen and the vicious dogs. Puppets are really powerful tools of telling a story. I wanted to tell the story of how children in the 1960s helped change the laws that were prevalent in the South, segregation laws. These children actually protested and they went to jail. It was a very difficult thing to do for them, but they were successful in making the laws illegal for those signs that used to say whites only or blacks only that you saw in stores and train stations and on water fountains. And I believe that's my last slide. Thank you.
Awesome. Awesome. Again, if you have questions, we will be available at the end of the presentations to talk to each of the presenters today. Thank you so much, Dr. Schroeder-Cherry. And I'm going to throw it to Tara, right? Isn't that what's up next? Tara?
Hi. Yes. I also just want to say that we also have an art share from Paulette Richards. Before we go forward, I just wanted to make sure that we can see if we can get that in there because she had prepared that. But today I am here to share a beautiful guest with you, someone I went to school with, and I'm really excited to share all the great work that she's doing, Estella Garcia. Come on out.
Hello.
Hi.
Thank you for having me. So exciting. So my name is Estella. I'm from Los Angeles, and I'm going to be sharing a video with you all to start. So just so that you all know, the video has two clips of some of my work. One is a solo play, or what started as a solo play and eventually became a bigger thing with more people. And that one is based on a surrealist painter called Remedios Varo. And then you will also see a piece that I just did in the fall that's called Hija de mi Madre. And I did that collaborating with Magali Castellanos and Julieta Ortiz. And this play is about the relationship of a mother and a daughter. And it did really well in the festival, and I want to share that with you all. And just one thing to note, that the work is all told through movement with no text. So enjoy.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that, Estella.
Thank
So,
you.
I didn't get to say your intro. I will say a little more of your intro for a second. I see you're a Latinx, Los Angeles born, raised writer, performer, director, teacher, tinkerer of materials that focuses on physical theater practices rooted in non-hierarchical approaches to theater making. You're a faculty member at Cal Arts. You're also a resident teaching artist for the Center Theater Group's Education and Community Partnerships Department. And you strive to create brave spaces where students can nurture vulnerability, risk, and confidence as storytellers. And you and I went to the same school.
Yes.
So I would just love to hear you tell us a little bit about that wonderful clip. Specifically, I would love to hear a lot more about Hija de mi madre, because the relationship with one's mother, the translation is about essentially becoming your mother, right? Becoming like your mom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a bit of a love letter to our parents, but also the identity of a daughter, and how the daughter or the parent and child relationship can be a little prickly. And as you know, for me, I'm first generation, and then my two other collaborators, they're immigrants from Mexico, and we had that relationship with, you know, a lot of times in the culture, it's like this caretaking of your parent, and we all have this experience of when our parents get older and juggling our having an individual life and also being there and for your parents, and so we really wanted to make a love letter to that experience. And yeah, and it was really great to work with these two incredible women. When we started working on the project, it was like the first post-pandemic project I was working on, and I was really wanting to focus on masks more, and reaching out to people that were culturally connected to the Latinx experience. I realized, or I was reminded more of how much hunger there is for mask work in our communities, because I know for myself as a first generation woman of color, there is a big history of putting women in a box, and of, you know, doing the thing that is safe. And so for a long time, there was a lot of struggle in like, will I do this? And I came into the work pretty late in life, and it was just really great to hear how many women are really interested in this work, and how liberating and freeing mass performance can be, to just get out of that box, to really transcend who people see you as, and you can, you know, defy age, defy gender, defy humanity, and play creatures. And in defying humanity, you're playing more and connecting to humanity in such a beautiful way, right? Because the mask, you cover your face, but it reveals more of you, it reveals more of us, and our connections. And a little bit also the reason why we use non-text-based work, or the reason I love to work in that way, is I am bilingual, and often there's this pulling of like the different cultures or the different languages, and I really wanted to create something that is available and defying language as well, that this work invites folks to be active participants in making meaning of what they're watching, because it's all body language. And we're able to see ourselves in that story and finish that story as we're watching it and experiencing it. And I think it's something that's just really important to me, to tell stories in that way.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I know from our conversations that you weren't at first telling your own stories, right? That this is actually sort of a new foray for you, going into a space where you're writing the work, you're creating the story that's being told. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, you know, I've always, you know, it's kind of coming back to myself a little bit, because I've always liked to write. I started off in a very non-traditional type of theater. I started off in Chicano theater. And so my introduction was like, tell your own stories. And we have to tell our stories because our stories aren't out there. And somewhere in the journey of getting my degree and coming back to LA and establishing myself and finding community here, I ended up working in different companies as a performer, and it was just kind of like going back into that box of like, this is how we make ends meet, or this is how we find our ways, because these are also the companies that have access. And it took me a while to really, just after some fighting about like the kind of stories I wanted to tell, to be like, yeah, I'm really ready. Maybe the productions are more lower in design in terms of budget and stuff, but it was really important to go back and to really highlight our stories, and to get back into the writing and the devising more than writing, because I love to write on my feet, right? And so that was just really important to me coming out of the pandemic, to really be seen in that way, and really not get out of that box, that comfort.
Absolutely, because you have to keep pushing. I have like 1 more minute. So I just wanted to ask you, last question. How were you introduced to masks, and what kind of masks were you introduced to?
Yeah, so it was in college. I went to UCLA, and I didn't know how to get into theater, and I ended up in a Chicano theater class. And I remember learning about Teatro Campesino, and they used masks to unite farm workers to get their rights, and it was used as a way to mobilize. And that was my introduction to masks and into the power of masks, and how and I just remember putting it on and just finding such freedom. And after that, it's been just a love story that continues.
Thank you so much, Estella. It's been wonderful talking to you.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, so now we're going to have an art share from Dr. Paulette Richards. Thank you so much for joining us in this section. You already shared amazing history with us, Dr. Richards. So now we would love to see your art share. What are we going to be seeing in this video, please?
This is a work in progress that I started this past June when I was doing a residency at Automata in Los Angeles. It features a series of dolls that I made during the pandemic when I couldn't get out shopping or buying dolls. And as I started to get to know their characters, one of them had a very particular story, which you will see in the video. So let's just roll it.
I'm down in the valley so low. Hang my head over, hear the wind blow, hear the wind blowing, hear the wind blow. I'm down in the valley, feeling so low. Early one morning, they broke down the door. I saw my father into the room. They put him in shackles and
Wow, that was beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing, Dr. Richards.
Thank you for allowing me to share it.
Of course, of course. Would you like to say any closing comments before we move on to our next artist?
No, I'll just leave it there.
Okay, thank you. All right, so next up we have String Theory Theater. Dirk Joseph and his children Coy and Azaria Rose. String Theory Theater is a Baltimore-based puppetry troupe, and they are presenting original performances for children and adults and employ various puppetry formats, including marionettes, crankies, large-scale parade puppets, and they were just awarded a Jim Henson Foundation grant. So big congrats. That's amazing.
Hello. Hello, everyone. So we are 2/3 of String Theory Theater here today. I'm Dirk, and
I'm Azaria.
And Coy, who's our third member, is not here right now, but sends greetings. And we are so excited and grateful to be part of this discussion and presentation with so many people that have been so inspirational for us and been really actually pivotal in the development and forwarding of our puppetry here in Baltimore and beyond. So really grateful to see our peers and colleagues and real supporters. So yeah, we've been we dabble in a lot of different kinds of formats of puppetry formats, and maybe we'll zero in on one or two to kind of focus on and really develop in the coming years. But we have a video that we'll share that's sort of a sampling of various performances that we've scripted and produced and performed. Yeah, so I guess I'd like to say that we for us, puppetry and this kind of object performance is sort of like a sacred thing. It's like sacred play in a way. but also just, stories and storytelling is, I feel like it's like a ritual, sort of a sacred art, because, after all, we we live through the stories that are in our heads. And so to, create stories that, challenge convention, or might, just that the intention is to create a connective healing, process, and even some of our performances, we they're scripted, but it's sort of like something we call narrative improv, where the audience is kind of pulled in a bit, and the outcome may or may not be determined. And we sort of have fun and kind of encourage play. But
Yeah.
for both Azaria and I, I would say that we were performing puppetry at home all the time, just in making our own figures. When I was young, before all the toys had screens and went beep, and before there was 24-hour children programming on television, we made our toys, and that's where I got into puppetry in the beginning. And I think Azaria did that quite a bit at home too, would sculpt little figures. And I've been a art teacher for a little over 30 years, and pretty much all the foundation disciplines: drawing, painting, and sculpture. But puppetry, when I started teaching puppetry, and I realized that it brought in all the different creative, those three creative disciplines, plus you can teach anything and explore anything through puppetry. It just was like an instant, like, oh yeah, this is the thing to do. And I've had the fortune to be able to work through some amazing programs in Baltimore, and really an amazing mentor of mine, Cash Hester, who's a person that connected teaching artists to schools, and had an organization to place teaching artists in schools. I got to teach all around Baltimore, and do a lot of theater and a lot of puppetry, and did that for a long time before I got inspired to by seeing a show by Schroeder, the Underground Railroad show, and meeting Valeska, and getting connected to Black Cherry Puppetry Theater. And Azaria and I, around 2016, formed String Theory Theater and started performing there. And
Jack,
yeah.
I'd love to hear a little bit more. Your work is really, really dynamic, and just hearing about your evolution with Azaria, from making puppets as toys, from teaching art to making your own work. Can you speak a little bit about how your working relationship between the two of you has evolved as both of your practices has evolved, either from being a teacher to creating your own stories, to doing more improv? I'm curious to hear how your working relationship has evolved, because it seems really special.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, well, I think we evolved a lot of storytelling and a kind of rapport, telling stories together through bedtime stories. It was really, that was like a sacred time. It was like everything is just this, in this moment, and what's on our minds. So we would sometimes tell collaborative stories, and take turns saying what happened next. And that even gave rise to one of our shows called the Collab Story. And but also Zaria, for a lot of her early elementary school years, was homeschooled. So while I was teaching, she would come with me sometimes, and got, I think, just developed a lot of sensibility around nuance, in storytelling and so on, and in performing and in timing and everything like that. So by the time we hit the stage, we already had some timing and sense of how to work with each other.
Yeah.
Yeah,
those bedtime stories are really important, setting the stage for a future performer. And Azaria, please jump in if you want to. I would love to hear a little bit more about, because you are so multidisciplinary and you do many, many different things. Even your Crankies have different forms of puppetry in them. what do you think, what draws you to Crankies? What do you think you can do in a Cranky that you can't do in a puppet show? Is there anything that you feel is like particularly unique to that medium?
Well, I've always liked illustration, and I really like graphic novels and comic books. And I feel like there's something special and kind of unique about having a comic book that moves. And I feel like having the scroll and having the physical motion of cranking it to have the story move is, I don't know, I have a draw to it.
Yeah, I agree. Same. Do you want to add anything?
Yeah, pretty much the same. You know, I like the Crankies, or a lot of the ones that we do, you know, involve shining a light and shadow puppets behind that. We may trade off who's doing the shadow puppetry and who's doing the cranking. We have shows where, you know, we swap off with that. But there's something about the coziness of a dim room and the Cranky. Actually, I have, this is our latest one, which is the smallest Cranky we've ever made. And it has a light in the back, so I can actually demonstrate a little bit about what I mean. So my screen's pretty bright, so it's still gonna light it up from the front. But if I turn on this light in the back here, and let's see if I brought it close up. Yeah, so I can like crank. And so in a dark room with a little small screen to look at, it's kind of amazing. Just everybody feels like, you know, and when we're performing, like hearing people's sighs or laughter or, you know, this collective kind of response to, you know, whatever is unfolding, it's, I don't know, it just feels very spiritual, and, you know, you can just, it feels very primal too, like sitting around a campfire and, yeah. So this is a Cranky that we made called Black Matter Lives.
You have so much detail on such a tiny screen. And I think what you said about it being kind of sacred and experiencing it together in a live space, it feels like these stories are giving us moments to process things that are happening really fast in the world and media. And this is like a different way of processing it and telling it. I remember seeing that for the first time. It was a really powerful Cranky.
Thanks.
Yeah. Okay, so we are just about out of time. But one more quick question. What would you say to another young person trying to make a Cranky for the very first time? Any, Azaria, any thoughts of inspiration or anything you would want to say to your peer?
I guess it's a bit, it sounds obvious when I say it, but don't start in ink. I think the first time I ever made a Cranky, I started working on it in ink, and I wanted to make so many changes. So I feel like, I don't know, sketching it out first, making the story and coming up with a plan as your like first step before even getting out the paper, like coming up with a clear vision for what you want to do, I would say is probably the most important step.
Yeah, it's a big commitment. It's a very long, continuous sheet of paper to, you know, meandering through it, you know, could be a thing if that's your style. But yeah, if you suddenly are like, oh no, I meant to do this before I did this, and you can't erase, and you have to start over on a sheet of paper that might be several yards long.
Yeah, I've definitely learned that the hard way. It's definitely helpful to plan and sketch. Great advice, Azaria. All right, so I think we're going to go to questions now for everybody. We'll throw them on the screen, and then I think we'll bring up all the panelists at once. And this is an opportunity we want to hear from all of you. What do our mediums have in common? What have you learned about the power of exposure in these art forms? Somebody just put in the chat that this is the first time they're hearing about Crankies. That's awesome. That's why we're here and doing this. Questions for panelists. What magic moments have you witnessed? Like maybe seeing a young person in one of your workshops make something successful for the first time, like their first puppet, like that beautiful velvet puppet that she presented. How do these forms overlap in their histories? We heard a lot about their history this evening. And how can these old visual storytelling art forms be a form of universal storytelling, no matter what your background is? Okay.
Okay, go for it. Anybody?
I'd have to say one of the most, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I'd have to say one of the most moving moments I had was in a museum. And I think I lost you. Okay. I think I lost the picture for a minute. Am I back on?
Yes,
Oh,
you're
okay.
here.
All right. One of the moving moments I had at a museum was when Ms. Lily gave a tour to adults. And after the tour, a woman came up to me and said, I've been divorced for 12 years, and today is the first time I've actually laughed. And that to me said something very powerful, that she, first of all, came to this experience willing to interact with the puppet, and then just got into the environment and just allowed herself to be engaged in this environment with the puppet.
Yeah, and I know Miss Lily. She is a character, so.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Shoot, just go for it, guys.
Well, I mean, that kind of reminds me of just how masks create this amazing release of who you think you are in space and allows you to be someone completely different. There's just this weird magic that happens when you're not you anymore. And I know that if you're an actor, okay, that happens anyway, right? Oh, I'm not being me. But no, your face is you. And once your face is covered, there's this other presence that parts of yourself that can come out. And so I relate to Dr. Cherry's story in that way with Mask.
For me, in the first clip that I saw that I shared, I had an audience member come to me at the end and talk to me about, oh, when you said this and when you said, and I was like, I didn't have any text. They're like, what? You didn't say anything? and to have them kind of engage in that way, and this person in particular had a story that I completely did not intend to tell, but like she connected it to her story with sobriety and was so incredibly moved and reflected in the story. And it just reminded me of, like, we're telling one story, but the audience is receiving a different one, and there's this beautiful partnership in there. But it just really touched my heart to have her see herself reflected.
I think an awesome moment for myself and Azaria and Coy was traveling to the University of Connecticut for an event that Paulette organized called the Symposium of African American Object Performance. Is that right? Or I think that was it.
Yeah, puppets as objects in performance. Those three words are all in the title.
Yes, yeah. And just the history, just so much history, and realizing just how we were a part, what we were connected to, and what the momentum, the ancestral legacy of puppetry and just indigenous culture in general, but specifically in African culture. That was just, I felt very elated, to be there, to have my daughters there. Like this is like a condensed college course, and but just felt very appreciative of all the work that went into that, and the work of the local Baltimore puppetry community to support us going there. So that was pretty amazing. Still resonates, even though it was a couple of years ago.
It's like 4 or 5, maybe more.
Anyone else wanting to share something?
I wanted to share that I am teaching a free workshop at the Black Cherry Puppet Theater on Monday. So if on your day off, you and your family are looking for something to do between 2 and 5 p.m., you can register for the workshop. It's limited to 15. And we'd love to have you. I just put the link in the private chat, and I guess Nia or someone knows how to push that out to the audience. Thank you.
And if anyone would like to see an exhibit of dolls and puppets, there is such an exhibit going on right now at the Frederick Douglass Meyerson Museum down in Baltimore. I'll put the name of the museum in the chat so you can check that out. It's an event on Sunday from 4 to 6.
I know there was a question earlier about puppet slams. So Valeska, can you talk a little bit about that and how people can participate?
Sure. So we have usually about 4 puppet slams a year. You can friend us on Facebook, find us on Instagram, reach out to us if you want to be added to our call for performers. We just started last night our inaugural puppet potluck, where we had 15 people come to Black Cherry Puppet Theater and share works in progress, everything from just a little seed of an idea to more fully formed puppets. And if you are wanting some support, we just want to create community for people who are interested in getting some feedback on the work that they're doing. But the next Puppet Slam will be on March the 18th at Black Cherry Puppet Theater. And as I mentioned earlier, Sheila Gaskins will be our amazing host. And a number of folks will be performing. And yeah, we'll have another one in June and another one probably around September. So they're regular. And that's how many of us really have developed our relationships with each other. So looks like Sheila's got her co-host already.
I'm trying to, it's really hard to do. I couldn't find the camera. So yeah, so that's a definite opportunity. So even if you think you can make a puppet, just come and see it. It's a lot of fun. It really is. So we just definitely want to expose people to that type of thing. Any more questions, guys?
It looks like that relates directly to Teresa's question here on the screen. Do you find yourself to be part of a puppet making community on a regular basis? To me, I think these puppet salons that Black Cherry is starting is trying to do that, where it's just like a monthly event where you can come and show something in person and in process. I'm definitely going to try and make the next one to get some encouragement and some support to actually finish my next piece. I try and do one a year. But would anybody else like to speak to how they find themselves in a puppet making community on a regular basis?
For me, part of the teaching was very effective, like going to these rec centers and booking myself to teach with the puppets in schools. That was an ongoing process this summer, and I definitely want to get back to that. So I'm always trying to find spaces where I can just bring all the stuff and we just make it happen.
Yeah, I would say that the puppetry community around the slams, like the backstage energy is like nothing that I experienced anywhere else. It's almost like everybody is an advocate or activist for something, and it's just very inspirational. Even if it's just you're an advocate for laughter, and feeling good. And I think I've heard my daughters talk about just like just these very unique, quirky people that are super cool to be around. So yeah, I imagine that most puppetry communities or theaters that have regular slams experience something similar.
Okay, any other comments?
I'll just say that we don't really have a mask making community that I know of, but Estella, we should start one. Because it one of the reasons we started this project was that we realized masks were becoming this really gated off thing, and that it was only accessible to folks who had money to go to a fancy school, and that and when Estelle and I were talking about it, she was like, yeah, but this is masked theater is a part of my people's culture. This is like the earth. This is the foundation of expression, big physical play. And it's funny to me that I'm like, oh, well, why is it so inaccessible? Why is it that, I talk to about masks to other people, and they feel like it's this really far off art form.
Sorry. And it's become this nostalgia thing, this far removed thing. When we just performed Hija de mi Madre, we had someone come in and tell us, like, I hadn't seen mass performance since I was in Mexico as a little kid, and just took me back. And it's almost like kind of like healing that inner child. I feel like going back to something that we know already, that is in our bodies, but that the the borders have kept from us.
Paulette, were you ready to say something? Oh, okay. Yeah. There's a question. How has puppetry and masquerade changed your perception of self and how you express your internal personal characters?
I found out I have a lot of internal personal characters that I probably would not express on my own, but working with a puppet, I feel freed up to do some things that I probably would not do on my own.
I know for me, I have those characters too. And I just appreciated a place where I can put my art and my love for art, visual art, and theater together. And puppetry was just that great marriage. So yeah, I'm doing a lot of work now, not talking. So it was really good to see your piece. Estella, help me with your name.
Estella.
Yes.
Estella.
Yeah, because I talked for the whole part of my life, and I'm a better listener. And so some of the work that I'm working on now doesn't involve talking at all, which my kids are really appreciative for.
That's funny.
Yeah, I want to add to that. I started a graduate program in the fall in urban planning. It's been taking me away from my artistic practice in a way that is really sad. So moments like these and events like these are really important. But recently, for one of my classes, they asked us to reflect on the stories and narratives and experiences that have shaped our view of our city and where we're from. And the first thing I thought of was, I want to make this a cranky because I feel like I can go deep and get more emotional than I can in a paper. And my teacher was like, yeah, do a cranky. And one day I'll hopefully show it. But it was like a moment to just get in touch with feelings and poetry and abstract visuals in a way that feels like it translates just in a different way, my own personal story. And I definitely want to bring that to the youth I'm teaching as well. Thank you for that question.
Any other comments?
We got a question here from Tony. He wants to know, do any of your experiences point to an element of your art form that brings people who don't necessarily regard themselves as artists in the most? So your experiences pointing to something in your art form that helps people see themselves as artists.
Go for it.
Yeah, I guess that's one of the reasons that I'm such a fan of puppetry in parades and mask in parade. It's our shared collective heritage. You know, one of the books that I love so much is Dancing in the Streets, A History of Collective Joy by Barbara Ehrenreich, where she just looks a little bit at some histories that that throughout time people have gathered in the streets, have disguised themselves in order to be able to party together. And I think that the parade building that I've been both a student in and a participant in have been so profound for me, because as Tara was saying, and as Estella was saying, like, what I'm moved by is that throughout the world, puppetry and mask are much more dominant cultural forces than I think in the United States they are. Highly developed, deeply collective, cyclical. People come together every year to do processions and rituals and community celebrations. And there's not a hierarchy or distinction. There may be people who are the mask makers or people who have that practice or trade, but people come together to make those events together. And it is my experience when we build parades here that people have that experience. They help to make something, they carry it in the parade. They are moved by the music in the parade. They are excited by the people watching them, and they suddenly understand themselves to be a performer and an artist. And so for me, that's one of the reasons why that continues to be such a powerful form.
Yeah, for me, the finger puppet was when I was teaching at a magnet school, was one of the first things that I taught. And the student said that I needed to teach this. And this person was in the first grade and 6 or 7 years old. And he brought this book in about finger puppets. And I never taught anything like that. And so I had to present that to him. And once I learned how to do the finger puppets, the whole school was turned into a place of finger puppets. So all the classes from kindergarten up to the 8th grade had these finger puppets. And when you walked into the school, on all of the walls were all of our finger puppets. And then at that time, A Whole New World was out, the Disney movie. And so we played that music, but you walked through this almost like an aquarium of finger puppets. And the special needs students, like everybody participated in this. And that was the equalizer for all of them. So we had your quote unquote regular students and we had our special needs, but you could not tell who was what through the finger puppets. And so I always say that we are all artists, and it starts with something as small as finger puppets. And I want to take that type of thing into prisons. And I wanted to do it like 2 or 3 years ago. And they were like, no. And I'm like, what you think? Somebody going to escape disguised as a finger puppet? Like, but I'm going to go back to find out, because that was a really beautiful experience. Something so small, and they all were able to participate. So I feel that way about finger puppets. Anybody else?
For me, I've also done some puppetry in community-based work, and I'm reminded of one of the shows we did, which was about 10 community members, not artists at all, and we just spent some time working on bunraku style puppets, and that it's just such a transformative place of like connecting people that are literally working together, 3 people to move as a whole, right? To breathe as a whole. One person's the head, the other's the arm and the torso, so that they have to connect on such a level and move as one. And so that can be such a connector that I've seen. And how much puppetry and mask, just that covering, that little covering does enough to give people the safety, where I've seen people that are incredibly shy just really pop up and play, even though by covering this, like all of this real estate of the body is like revealed. So you're showing more of yourself and you're just covering this much, but yet it's enough to get people to play on a grand scale, and that's always really fun to see in students and in community members.
Yeah. I had a question for Dirk. I saw in your piece music. Is that original music, or how does that work?
No, it was recorded music that we have 2 pieces where I found music that I hunted down the artists and just got permission. But there's some that, that I guess some liberties are taken. And I credit the artist wherever I can, but I haven't created original music. Though there's some plans for that. We've got a budding bass guitarist here.
I'm not Koi's the bass guitarist. I just normal guitar.
She's okay acoustic guitarist and a bass guitarist.
No, I play electric and acoustic. Koi's plays bass.
And a ukulele, right? And I've got some instruments that I'm working on. So hopefully we will be producing our own music, even though it'll be challenging to play music and perform puppets at the same time. So we'll work that out.
Unless it's a musical puppet. We got a question. Are there sites on the internet where you can learn more about Crankies?
I just Googled puppet Crankies and a whole bunch of sites came up. So try that.
Yeah, I put in the chat. I learned a lot about Crankies through local artist Catherine Fahey. I think one of the gems of Baltimore, why it's such a incredible community for puppetry and cranky making, is that people are really generous with their knowledge and their skills. So I think Catherine taught a cranky making workshop at the Creative Alliance maybe 4 or 5 years ago that I took. And she showed me to Sue Truman's website that I put in the chat, the Cranky Factory. And Sue Truman has collected a lot of histories and different styles of crankies and different artists and profiles. So that's one resource of many that exist, because crankies have existed forever in many different forms. Cranky is just a fun Baltimore term that I think came out of Anna Elizabeth's Cranky Festival. And then I also put in a link to the Chicago Puppet Festival that's every year. They do an awesome job of having workshops. I took a shadow puppetry workshop this past fall that again was like so generous. The artist, Linda, I can't remember her last name right now, but she really walked you through exactly how to make a shadow puppet from beginning to end, no matter what your experience was, and how to make it like multi-jointed. And it was really accessible and all on Zoom. So we didn't have to be in Chicago. So that's a great place for workshops.
Well, I think that was our last question of the evening. Is that correct? Sheila, do you want to take us out?
Yeah, so one of the questions that I meant to ask in the beginning is, how can we get this to younger people at a younger age? And because, what if I don't go to college? And like I said, that baby, 8 years old, and it looked velvet. So that's 8. So just imagine at 12. So I'm curious to you guys, how can we get this, all of them, Crankies, mask, puppets, into younger people at a younger age? How can that happen?
I think you have some opportunities already. For example, with Black Cherry Puppet Theater, bring your kids to where the performances take place. Also in Glen Echo, you've got the Puppet Company, and they have performances as well. Once the kids are exposed to different types of puppetry, they'll find another way to get involved.
Okay. Anybody else?
I mean, I've definitely been realizing that just object play is something that we can just be doing with our young people all the time, because I think masks are assumed to have to be like Halloween masks, or a particular thing that comes out at a particular time, and then it's not relevant anymore. But actually any object can be a puppet or a mask, and that sense of reigniting play with objects, I think, is a big part that we could contribute with our own families and communities.
Any other words of wisdom, people?
Yeah, I think that approaching, administrators in schools who may know that art is valuable, but still are like leaning into other things, test scores and other things that they prioritize. But parents and maybe artists as advocates for that, because there's enough evidence to show. But also, like as you were just talking about with masks and with having like other aspects of your identity come forth, that's a very, very necessary thing for children to play. It's like I mentioned, I said the phrase sacred play. Like it's important to be able to allow play to be a almost like a virtual reality space to explore different things that are coming at you from the world. And children often, even by their own parents and by people who have to take care of children, they're pushed towards non-imaginative, easy cookie cutter stuff that they want to call play that's not actually play, because there's no imagination involved in it. It's video games and things that you're just following along so I think a movement towards like respecting how powerful that is and how necessary it is, because there's so many, there's an epidemic of anxiety and all kinds of depressive things that come out of not being able to play with your own mind and imagination, and let certain things come forward to kind of put on the table in front of you and interact with it all in a kind of safe space. I think that's what early childhood play should have, and it's it's sad that that's lacking so badly.
Yeah.
We should also mention that there's a national puppetry festival that's going to take place in College Park, Maryland in July of this year, between July 17 and 24. So Google National Puppetry Festival to get that information.
Nice. Any other puppet things that we should know about, you guys?
Also, the National Capital Puppetry Guild, NCPG, they've been really amazing for the last several years in making a lot of programming available for free, workshops. Many of us are members. Some people are on the board that are on the panel. So I would also mention that as a resource.
Anybody else?
The Skirball Puppet Festival is coming in LA in a few weeks, I believe, as well, for those on the West Coast.
Some of us from the East Coast are going to go out there for that too.
I'll be there.
Okay, so we're about to wrap things up. One of the things that we like to do is thank our sponsors, the Grit Fund. So Google that. If you have potential to do something creative and hopefully you can get funded for it, Google the Grit Fund. Also, Alternate Roots, an organization that's been around for 40 plus years. They are on the cusp of social justice and art and poetry, and they also fund projects like this one. So again, that's somebody else that you can Google. And also, there are a lot of things that are going around the city that you can participate in. And if, I'm of the as a weird theater person, I'm the kind of person that's like, hey, what are you doing? I like whatever you're doing. How can we be friends? So, let's get out of our comfort zone. And if somebody's doing something that you like and you're curious about it, talk to them. Like their page, follow them. Because one of the beauties of this whole project was that Maura, Tara, and I, we're just talking. I just think y'all should know that we were just talking. We were like, hey, this is going on. Yeah, me too. Hey, what about me? And hey, let's submit this and get a grant. Bam, we got a grant. So we realized that the conversations, I know, thank you, Grit Fund, thank you, everybody, because the conversation was necessary and other people think it is too. So we are looking for, hopefully, to do a big, giant, what we trying to do, Maura and Tara, in the future? What we trying to do? What we putting out there?
Doing communities, yes. Larger grants, larger community projects, festivals. We're interested in making something with an entire group of folks in an area where we can have an uplift, an experience of uplift for everybody. So yeah.
Yeah, and I want to go into senior citizen centers because they have stories to tell too. But we thank each and every one of you for participating and going on this journey with us. And thank you, Maura. Thank you, Tara. Thank you, Dr. Schroeder. Thank you, Estella. Thank you, Dirk and Azir. Help me with your name. Zaria. Thank you, Valeska. Thank you, Dr. Paulette. Thank you all for playing with us and being with us. And so as we wrap up, ladies, what words do you have, your one word that you like to see in the future based on what we've started?
For me, it's just collaboration, continued, authentic, honest, bold collaboration.
It's 2 words, ferocious play.
Ferocious play. Yeah. And I think I'll take the word fun.
Yeah. Fair.
Fun. Okay, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out.
Good night.
Please Google all of those places and those words that we talked about today. We could not have been so successful unless you showed up. And that's so important that you did. We want to thank Nia Hampton, who was the Zoom boom yard person operator, did a wonderful job. And we want to thank all the schools and the places that we participated in this summer.
Libraries.
Yes, libraries, rec centers.
West Community Center, yep.
Yes. And don't forget, Monday, there's an opportunity to participate with Dr. Paulette Richards in we want to thank Black Cherry Puppet for housing us on Monday. And we're just grateful and humble and glad that we got through this. And I think it's just beginning because I can see this on NPR. Why not?
I know.
Why not? I know some people, you know some people. Hey. But yes, so we want to say thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Good
night.
night.
To the next time. Woo! Yes.